With the commanding presence of Diana Ross and the soulful vocal richness of Dusty Springfield, Mari Wilson, along with her iconic beehive, of course, burst onto the early 80s pop scene with a sound that revived classic pop sophistication and made it feel fresh, witty, and irresistible. Hits like Just What I Always Wanted didn't just climb the charts, they defined a moment and established Mari as one of the most distinctive voices of her generation. But when the hits began to fade and the pressure mounted to move in a direction that didn't reflect who she truly was, Mari faced a pivotal choice. Rather than compromise her identity, she chose a different path, stepping away from the mainstream spotlight and embracing a new creative direction that allowed her artistry to evolve on her own terms. What followed is a story not just of pop success, but of integrity, reinvention, and enduring individuality. Mari Wilson, welcome. This is an enormous pleasure. I've read so much about you. I've gone through all your music in the last few days. I've had a lot of fun with that. And there's so many brilliant songs and so many brilliant interpretations, which is to be able to put yourself into a song and make it yours is an incredible talent, I think. It's just amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
So I want to start up with your early life and get onto the new album and single later, but you were brought up in London, and I just wondered what sort of household you were brought up in musically and creatively.
Well, both my parents were Scottish. My dad came down to London when he was 17 looking for work, and his sister already lived in London, in Neasden, and he stayed with her. And then other things happened, like the war and stuff like that. And eventually he found a job, and they moved into the next street with my mum, which I always think, my God, she left Scotland and she was 23 or something, not knowing anybody in London. There's no phones or video, or the only way you can keep in touch really is by letter. I think, God, what a brave thing to do. It must have been hard for her. Anyway, so they had three kids. They had my sister Helen first, then my brother, and they were both planned. And then I was the result of a really good New Year's Eve party, apparently. So where they left the other two kids with my auntie Sis, and according to my mum, she said, and your dad got a wee bit fruity that night, and you turned up the following September. So that's how I came about. My brother is also a musician. There was always singing in the house. My dad had a lovely voice. My mother had a really lovely voice. If she'd been born at a different time, she probably would have been a singer and an actress. That's what she would have loved to have done. But not much chance of that when you're very working class, and But she was always singing at parties and things like that. And we would all sing together, like the Von Trapps. And when my brother was about 14, he started playing guitar. And there's 6 years between me and my brother and 8 years between me and my sister. But me and John would sing all the time, Bee Gees, Beatles, if we did If I Fell by the Beatles, because that fantastic harmony. It was like, well, can we do it twice? I'll do the harmony first, and then you can do it,
Was your talent recognized then very early on?
Yes, but I was very shy, believe it or not, because I am shy in a way. My brother he used to do Al Jolson impersonations up at the club where my mum and dad belonged, because my dad worked for London Transport, and they had a club called the Met Club, because Wembley Park is on the Metropolitan line, and that's where it was. And the band that played there were called the Metros. Hilarious, really. And John would get up on the stage and sing an Al Jolson song with the arms out and everything, and they'd throw pennies, He would get up at the drop of a hat. Me, on the other hand, my dad was always, come on, Mary. And I go, I don't want to. I did want to, but I was too scared. But then when I was 11, Puppet on a String was in the charts. And that was my favourite song to sing. And then we were at a party, the same party where I was made from. And my dad said, come on, sing Puppet on a String. And I did. And I really liked it. I thought, I quite like this, So that was our home, lots of Sunday morning, my dad would be in the front room listening to Jim Reeves. My mum and I used to sing James Taylor songs together, like Fire and Rain and stuff like that. So we were all, even my sister is musical. She's not a musician, but she can sing, she can harmonize,
Did
So
you
yeah.
said that you were on stage, you sang Puppet on a String, Sandy Shore, of course. Um, was it the reaction that you got that made you feel good, or was it the fact that you were singing? Because sometimes I think for people that start out, the reaction plays a big role in sort of the drive of wanting to do something.
Yeah, I think it was a bit of both, really. I think I sang it and I thought I sang it well and everyone loved it. So it was just a very nice feeling, because I just used to watch my brother always doing that. And I used to wish I could do it, but just didn't have the confidence. So when I did do it that first time, yeah, it was great. Yeah, I think, yeah, I just think the feeling of standing up and singing and people listening to me, that was the feeling, still the same now.
What ethics or morals did they install in you that have been useful throughout your life?
Oh, that's very, very deep, isn't it? Well, I just think they were kind, my dad was very generous to a fault, really. It was always like, here's a fiver, go on, have a nice time. If I was going out with a girlfriend, this is when I was like a teenager, but always did that. I think being being honest, I think, and also a little bit of, I mean, this is kind of growing up in the 50s and 60s, a bit of kind of knowing your place, and showing respect. Because in those days, you showed great respect to people like doctors. We had a doctor called Dr. Wills who would come to the house and he had a white laboratory coat and those pince-nez uh, glasses on the end of his nose, straight out of central casting, basically. Um, so I think it was very much to show respect, not use bad language. Um, I think it was it was right and wrong. That's what they were all about, doing the right thing. And also things like being punctual. My dad was a real stickler for always being on time, you know. Um, so yeah, things like that. I mean, what I find is sometimes um, you see posts on social media about, I don't know, someone maybe dying and there would always be one person that might post, but they make the post about them. They always, oh yes, I remember what, he played on my album or and it's like, no, just talk about him, not what you did. And I never do that. And I think I get that from my mum and dad. It's like, no, don't make everything about yourself. I think that's one of the things I learned from them.
What was the song, do you think, that you heard as a teenager? I mean, if I think of myself as like a 13-year-old, it was 1972, and it was a Bowie track. And David Bowie represented a world where I felt I could belong. Because I think I felt, I mean, as a young gay kid, I felt like an outsider. So for
Of
me,
course,
Bowie
yeah.
represented this world of belonging. And music is often about belonging. So I just wondered what track really resonates or resonated with you as a teenager.
Wow. Um, I think there are so many really. Um, because my taste became so sort of eclectic because with my brother it was the Bee Gees and the Beatles mainly and the Hollies and then and then Crosby, Stills and Nash. I mean, possibly Carole King's Tapestry. That had a big effect on me, and so did Bonnie Raitt. When I first heard her, I kind of wanted to be Bonnie Raitt. But then on the other extreme, there was like Motown and Stax. So it's hard for me to pinpoint one song, really. I mean, the first record I bought was Love Me Do, and I was very, very young because I saw they were on Tuesday Rendezvous with Muriel Young, and they did Love Me Do, and I remember telling my brother about it because he wasn't there when he must have been at school or I don't know. And I remember going to the record shop in Neasden and buying Love Me Do, but I must have been, I mean, I must have only been about 9 or 10, I think. Um, but the everything that influenced me was such a mix. I mean, I babysat for this couple, um, Harvey and Linda, and one of the first night must have been the first night I babysat for their two kids. The kids were in bed, and I looked at their record collection, and they had Blood, Sweat and Tears, Santana, and Chicago. And I'd never heard this music. This wasn't music my parents liked or knew about, or my brother and sister. I mean, my sister was into the blues, like Howlin' Wolf and stuff like that. I mean, it was quite wide, and my mum was into Peggy Lee. Um, and I remember playing these records, especially Chicago. And I thought, and this is the Chicago, not If You Leave Me Now, Chicago. This is the early Chicago, when it was the first time I'd heard what probably became a kind of fusion of, you didn't have bands with electric guitars and horns. They were the first band to do that. And that's when I really got into drummers. I'm so fussy about drummers. Um, and I got very interested in drummers. And I still play that Chicago Transit Authority. I still play it now. I play a lot of their stuff. I saw them at the Hollywood Bowl about 4 years ago, which was an ambition. Um, so do you see what I mean? It was so mixed. Motown Stax, Bonnie Raitt, Dusty Springfield, definitely, because my sister was into her because she had the hair and all that, and the voice. Um, so such a mix. I'm sorry
Yeah.
that I can't pinpoint it to one thing.
No, not at
You
all.
know.
I mean, I've seen interviews where you talked about Dusty, Diana Ross, Marvin Gaye, John Lennon, McCartney, Teddy Pendergrass, who I just think
Oh
is the most
God, yeah.
amazing
Well,
singer
that was when I
ever.
went to America. Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
but what did these stars inform you about singing?
Um, I think um, performance and telling a story with your voice, you know, because it's not only the lyric really. I mean, if you listen to something like "The Winner Takes It All" by ABBA, her voice is so melancholy that you know from the first few notes this is going to be a sad story, you know? Um, so it's that. And I think because I was also a big fan of Judy Garland, I wanted to be able to do that thing where I could sing a song and kind of make people laugh with it, which I have done and still do. Um, and then the next song, maybe have them in tears. I love that, the difference between each performance and each song. I think it's performance, really, and phrasing. That's what it is. Otis
Because
Redding, it's phrasing.
I mean, okay, just to talk about performance, the when I go to a gig, there always seems to be a moment where I feel connected. It comes early. If occasionally I don't, but if there is most gigs, there's a moment where I feel very connected. And I just wonder from a performer's point of view, is there a moment when you're performing when you know you've connected to the audience?
Yeah, yeah. And there's moments when you know you haven't. Um, that can sometimes be, I mean, touch wood, fortunately, that hasn't happened to me for a while because I think when you become more and more experienced with performing in front of an audience, especially performing in front of a small audience, because when you like I did the O2 a few years ago with Soft Cell, and it was great, but the audience are miles away, and they're going out and getting a burger or getting this or do you know what I mean? It's like they're not completely connected because they're so far away. When I play somewhere like Pizza Express in Holborn, which is a small club, and I mean, at that particular one, at the front of the stage, there's a bar, and people are sitting 3 feet away from me, you know. Um, so I think it's experience of gigging all the time and how to get them. Although that sounds very kind of sort of cynical, but I don't really mean it that way. It can be because you're very nervous, and so you go out there with sort of too much, too you're too nervous and you're too worried about what's going to happen. So you're not relaxed enough to let them in because you've got to let them in. But mostly
Is
what I
that a
like about playing
vulnerable
with,
situation? Does it
Yeah.
mean you have to be vulnerable at that
Yeah,
moment?
you have to be vulnerable. I mean, I've seen singers that don't show any vulnerability, and there's like a wall between you and them. You know, you have to be vulnerable because how are you going to sing a sad song if it's not? It's got to be honest. You know, it's got to be honest. So I think that nervous thing, you got to try and get over it. Really, I mean, Guy Barker, trumpet player who I worked with for years, who's a dear friend of mine. He always used to say it's all in the preparation. It's all in the preparation. So if you're a bit unrehearsed and all that kind of thing, that's gonna, I mean, I did some of the new songs recently at Pizza Express Holborn, and they all went fine. But a couple of the songs that I've been singing for years, I completely forgot the words, because I sort of took my eye off the ball, I suppose. And so you don't want to get too cocky. I'm all right with that one. I know that one, because it comes back to bite you. But you have to be vulnerable, and you have to let them in and be honest, and not be too worried about what you look like, because as I'm getting older, that is a concern, because it's kind of a young person's game, and you sort of think, oh my God. I mean, when I did a gig in a theatre not that long ago, I was in the wings having a look at the audience. And I, I said to my keyboard player, I said, "Oh, they're really old, aren't they?" And he went, "They're your age." It's like, "Oh, yeah." you know so you got to try and get over yourself, a little bit.
Were you an outsider at school? Because a lot of people who have been in the music industry have felt as outsiders when they were young. And with your personality, I can't imagine you ever being an outsider.
Well, I was a ringleader. I was quite naughty. And there were things like I was a rebel and probably horrible, to be honest. I mean, there was a toilet in the girls' toilets, and on the front it said, "Keep out Mari's smoking toilet." I mean, I, I was very argumentative. I I remember Miss Henderson, who we used to call Mrs. Woodentop. She took history. She was the headmistress, but she took history. And I was reading Melody Maker in a history class, and she said, well, she told me off, and I said, but I don't need to know about Henry VIII because I'm going to be a pop star later, so I won't really need to know stuff like that. And she used to say, "Well, Mary, you're getting too excited." Um, I think I had and have ADHD actually, because I couldn't concentrate at all, you know. Um, I couldn't retain much information, probably because I was so distracted all the time, And I'm still, if I'm with my husband, we're watching a film or something, I say, "I'm just going to the loo," and he says, "Don't tidy up the sock drawer on your way back." Because I might go, "Oh, I'll just fix that," because where have you been? Um, so I think that's a possibility. I had lots of friends, but I was a bit, until I got to maybe 16, 17, when I started to grow up a little bit more. I was very, very rebellious.
So how old were you when you said, I'm going to be a pop star?
14,
Oh,
maybe.
wow.
Yeah,
That, that's
I know.
amazing. Because it's
Mm.
if whenever you declare something, it really opens the door to starting going somewhere, doesn't it?
Yes,
You know,
yes, yes. It's like an affirmation, isn't it?
yeah.
You know, I was always convinced that I was going to be on top of the pops, always. But I mean, I've got lots of very, very, very talented friends who haven't had that career. It didn't happen for them. I don't know why it worked for me. Right place, right time. There's a lot of boxes that have to be ticked, aren't there? People being in the right place at the right time, trends that are going on, I suppose. And being open to it, being open to opportunities. That's the thing.
I mean, you
But
mentioned
yeah,
there
I
are
mean,
trends that are going on. I mean, you were famous for your style, and in a sense, it was a trend that wasn't necessarily going on at
oh,
that time. It was
not at
an
all.
anti-trend in a way, which made it refreshing as well.
Yeah, I think because it was kind of post-punk, when everyone had, pierced noses and wore, not glamorous clothes. Um, I think that was probably why, because and then everyone was getting dressed up, not in the same way I was, but if you look at the Eurythmics or Human League or Boy George, we were all very glamorous, and also we all had a style of our own. It was very much. going to charity shops and or getting someone to make you something. I mean, I was the charity shop queen, and Neasden Jumble Sale. They used to put things aside for me that they thought I might like. In fact, the first dress I wore on TV was 40 pence. Oh no, it was 20 pence. It was a blue Lurex number. So yes, we were going against the trend. Yeah, I mean musically as well, really. Not just what I was wearing.
Just to go back a bit though, you mentioned earlier, you sort of just hinted at that just before you went to America, to work as a nanny, a children's nanny, I believe, for a short period. How
Yeah.
did being in America change your perspective? Because when we're young and we go away, it does change us and we come back a slightly different person. And I just wondered what it opened you to.
Well, I went when I was 18. I was there for 3 years and in New York. And it was amazing. I mean, the first time the people I worked for, he was a veterinarian, and one of his lab technicians, one of his employees said, "Oh, I'll take Mary out," because obviously I didn't have any friends yet. And she took me to this club on Long Island called St. James Infirmary. And it was a completely different vibe to the clubs I've been to in London. There were lots of people, girls that were on their own, that had just gone out. They weren't necessarily in bunches of girls. And in the middle of the club, to the side of the stage, was a massively long bar, which we don't have, which was like free, like an island in someone's kitchen. It was like that, but a really long one. So you could walk all the way around it if you like, very unusual. Never seen that before. And every club I went to, there was a band playing, and the band would be playing covers, and people would dance to the band. Then when they took a break, the records would come on, but people didn't really dance to the records, which was like, I thought, oh, I mean, we did a bit, and eventually we did more so, but so that was very different, and the bands were really good. They sounded like the records. They were really good. So that that was amazing. I loved the confidence of Americans, whether it's real or not. It's quite nice. There's nothing wrong with someone saying, "Have a great day" when you leave the shop or something. I don't care if it's sincere or not. It's just nice. It's just a nice way to be. So I like that side of things. I also discovered loads of different radio stations. So there was a black radio station, a soul station, a country station. Never had that ever. So I used to listen to the black soul station mostly, and I heard loads of amazing. I do a song with my band called Mr. Fix-It Man, which I heard when I was over there. I've got the single. It's by a three-girl group called The Sisters Love, and it's called Mr. Fix-It Man. The lyric is ridiculous. It's very funny, and the track itself is so funky. So stuff like that. And then there was one particular night, and this sticks in my head. I went to this club again. I think I went on my own because I knew there were going to be people there I knew by this time. And I was sitting at the bar, and we didn't drink then. I mean, we were underage anyway, but it didn't even occur to us to drink like it would in London. Anyway, this track came on, and it was like an epic. And I thought, what's this? And it was Love Unlimited, the three girls who sang with Barry White. And it was a track called Under the Influence of Love. I don't know if you've ever heard it.
Yeah, I love that track.
There's like a storm, the strings, and when you're listening to it really loud in a club, your mind is blown.
And it's the harmonies, isn't it, as well? It's like,
oh yeah, everything is fantastic. And the drumming, you see. So that's a guy called Ed Green. And so the person I got into probably the most was Barry White. And my friends, that was the other thing that was different. My friends would say, "Oh, you working Saturday?" "No." "Oh, we're going to go to Jones Beach." And I'm thinking, blimey, I'd only ever been to, as far as living in London, you go to Brighton or Southend. I went to Jones Beach. That was such an eye-opener. There were burger bars and shops, and and just loads and loads of young people and massive car parks. Because, you want to go to Brighton, where are you going to park? This was a different lifestyle altogether. And it was hot, great weather all summer. And I remember getting into my friend Laura's car, and she put on, I think it must have been one of those VHSs that you had in your car, those big, they look like a VHS, those things. Well, 8 tracks, that's what they were called. And it was Barry White. And then I just couldn't get enough of Barry White constantly, constantly. And recently I was in America and I was listening to Barry White. And I said to my husband, oh my God, Ed Green's drumming is so good. I mean, the drumming on The First, The Last, My Everything is so good. And I found him on Facebook. So I messaged him and we had a little conversation. I was so pleased with myself, So yeah, those were the differences. The outdoor life, that was it's so different. People had swimming pools, they'd have pool parties. It's like I only saw that on the Monkeys, So I love that.
You mentioned there that, about the idea of a band and how a band really, affected you. So that was probably the seed of this idea of the Wilsations, of the band. So when you came back, you must have been 21, 22.
Yeah, 21, yeah.
And it was, you didn't have your breakout success. I know that you had some tracks out and a couple of them were lower in the charts, but your big breakout success until you were about 26. So in those years, was it about really touring and building, a period of building your talent in a way, and also the band's talent?
Yeah. Well, it's quite an interesting question, really. When we made these records, me and like Tot Taylor at the very beginning, like Dance Card and Love Man, they were big sounding records, and they weren't all synthy, and so we were talking about, I said, I need to do some gigs. I want to do some gigs, blah. And Tot said, well, you're going to need a really big band to make it sound like this, because we don't have backing tracks then or anything. I said, well, we'll have a big band then. First mistake financially. So I got 2 of my friends to be backing singers. And the first 2 or 3 gigs, there was actually 13 of us. But then, of course, we reduced it to only 12. And I mean, a lot of them weren't even musicians, really. And so as I've got to be sort of a bit delicate with this, as time went on, I realized that the girls, they were great, they looked great and everything, but they couldn't do harmonies. So I'd teach them a harmony and I go, right, let's practice. And they just end up singing what I was singing because they weren't naturally musical. And so eventually, I think nearly everybody left because I had to have proper musicians. We had to improve the sound of the band live, and that was really important to me. But we'd do gigs. We were doing the universities all the time, and there would be John Otway and Wild Willie Barrett, and they'd be on as well, and they'd be getting the same money. And there was 2 of them. Oh, I think this is crazy, all these people to pay, because it was a democracy. I wasn't getting paid more than them, but it was fantastic. Money isn't everything, or is it?
More Mari Wilson in a few seconds, but just time for me to ask you to like, subscribe, and look out for other interviews at popthehistorymakers.com. Now, back to Mari, where she talks about success, a change of direction, and her new album. The feeling that this is where something is going to explode through. How was that period? Was that exciting? That anticipation of success?
That is a really good question, because I often bring this up. When you are bubbling under, or word of mouth, these things are starting to happen. I remember being in a cab with Tot on the way to a gig. I think it was the Father Red Cap. Some little pub somewhere, and he said, you could be really big, I think. And I said, I remember them saying that. But and as it was sort of, we were getting a bit of radio play and stuff, that feeling of just before it happens, just before you become famous, for want of a better word, um, that's the best bit, the just before bit. And you never, ever, ever get it again. Um, because you can't get it again. Because even if you haven't had a hit, or even if you haven't done it for years or any, you're never going to have that feeling again where you're completely unknown and there's this little buzz going on. And it's, it's, I remember the first time I was on Top of the Pops, inside I was nervous, but I was thinking, yeah, well, this is all part of my plan. I told Miss Henderson I was going to, but that feeling, I wish there was a word for it. It's probably a similar feeling to when you meet someone and you're madly in love, that first few months or whatever, um, that even if you still love your partner, you never get that bit back again. It's kind of like that, but it's fantastic feeling. It's just sheer excitement and anticipation. It's lovely.
When it happens though, and you're on Top of the Pops and you achieve that childhood dream, and I mean, when you come up, I really felt like you created this world, this Mari Wilson world, with the image,
Yeah.
with the beehive, with everything about you, with the voice and the singing and the songs. And it was a different world. And I just wondered, and I know there were some elements that were anti you, and I just wondered, were you prepared? Or can you be prepared for that? Because you come along, you have this fame, and then you have some odd journalistic review, which in a sense
Mm.
is knocking you down.
Actually, I don't think it bothered me that much because we were doing so well. It was kind of like, well, it doesn't matter what he says. I don't care. I mean, just what I've always wanted when it was on. Do you remember Round Table on Radio 1 where they would, if I was on there once with Neil from The Young Ones, who was in character, which was very funny. But I remember it was reviewed, just what I've always wanted, on Round Table, and it didn't get a very good review. They said it sort of sounded too modern, it wasn't retro enough, and blah, blah, blah. But that became my biggest hit. So it just shows you that, people's opinions or whatever, um, it's not always the truth or what's going to happen. But also at that time, because I was sort of flying high, it didn't really bother me that much. And it was a Mari Wilson world. When you've got a band that big, so there's 12 of you, and then when I started to really seriously tour, you've got a lighting guy, a sound guy, a driver who drives the bus, because we had to have a bus because there were so many of us. Um, you are in this world, this kind of bubble thing, especially when there's so many of you. I think at one point there was 22 of us as a team, touring and everything, which is really expensive. Um, But I was a bit naive at the time. I didn't even think about all that. I wasn't thinking about money. I was still living at home, with my mum and dad. Um, so I didn't think about it too much. But um, yeah, it was like a world, because also because there was so many of us, what was nice was, you'd get to a town and maybe you'd go off with the two girls, or the next day you might go off with your drummer and guitarist. So it didn't ever get really nasty, because if there's four of you, it possibly can get like that. But when there's so many of you, it's like being on a school journey, a school trip, So it was very funny. I mean, the bus always used to come to me last because I lived in Neasden near the North Circular, so we were nearly always heading up north, And my mum would make scones for everybody and put them in a little bag. Everyone would get two or three scones each, all buttered and jammed. And it was so sweet that she did that, Yeah, they loved my mum and dad, the band. It was, and my mum and dad loved them, They loved the whole thing. So it was very sweet. It was very naive, It was, we'd go on tour, no mobile phones. You couldn't, you had your Walkman, and that was it, really,
That success went on for a period, but it does feel like, and I have read an interview where it essentially said that you were under pressure to change your style, which seems very odd to me, considering that you created a style that
Yeah,
created a wave and broke through. So how did that make you feel, first of all?
that was a real bone of contention, to be honest. There were a few things that happened. Um, I started, I think I started to, I don't know if take control is the right word, but I started to notice things, feel things, watch what was going on a bit more. And that, like my manager, who, I'm really fond of him, but he wasn't the greatest manager. Uh, but he booked us, he got us a gig at Bailey's in Watford. And I remember saying, we shouldn't be playing Bailey's. That's not my audience at all. Because I knew who my audience was. At least I knew that. And I knew Bailey's wasn't it. And we never played there. I said, I'm not playing there. That's wrong. You're putting me in the wrong place. And I didn't want to become end of the pier doing my hits down the line. I definitely didn't want that. Um, so, and then I think it was Tot wanted me to do like high energy Hazel Dean type stuff, and we did record a track called
Let's
uh,
make it last.
yes. Oh my God! I remember doing the vocal and thinking, this is absolute shite. What am I doing this for? Um,
Is it true that you did the
and
vocal on the day your father died?
yeah,
Oh my God. I mean,
yeah,
I could, okay, I know it sounds a weird thing, but if you're going to sing an incredibly emotional, song
yeah.
with lots of pathos in it and everything, then it sort of fits. But to go and sing a high energy song
Yeah,
on
it,
that
it
day
wasn't
sounds
on the
insane.
day. I think it was the next day. It was the next day because I did go to the hospital with my mum and everything on the day it happened because he died like in front of me, in the living room. Um, so it was the next day. So that was rather poignant. That was a sign maybe. So I sound very nasally. I'm just getting over sinusitis. So I sounded like Melvin Bragg for the last week. Anyway, um, So that was the turning point when I did that vocal. I just thought, what am I doing? This isn't, I was like, I want to be Dusty Springfield or I want to be Judy Garland or, Peggy Lee or something. So I was very unhappy. And Roger Ames, who was the A&R guy at the record company, he didn't get along with Tot. It was all a bit messy. And I felt I had to show my loyalty to Tot, which is like when we were talking about what my mum and dad taught me, I think that was like a moral thing. Well, I've been with Tot all along, whereas Roger was trying to more or less say, leave all that, just come with us and be a solo artist. And here's Dusty in Memphis. Have a listen to this. This is what you should be doing. He was right. And I should have taken that up with him. Um, but I didn't. I just thought, no, I need to be loyal to Tot. I mean, that's I'm not trying to paint a great picture of myself because it was silly, really. Um, but that's just the way I was made. And maybe I was a bit insecure about going and leaving those people that I knew. Um, yeah, so I realized that I needed to get out. And that's when I uh, basically sacked my manager and said, I want to leave the record company. Uh, so can I just go and blow my nose?
Yeah,
I know I'm sort of
absolutely.
right in
No,
the middle
no,
of something, but I'm sorry. I'll be two ticks. Oh, I'm so sorry about that.
you didn't rearrange the sock drawer.
Yeah, so I just said I sat my manager, told the record company, I told my lawyer I want to get away from the record company. And he said, well, usually the record company drop the artist. And I said, I know, but I said, I'm so unhappy, I can't carry on like this. And so I was in litigation for a year, 18 months. So I couldn't sign with another record label, not that I was being chased by any, but so my sax player, who is still my sax player, Stuart Curtis, said, why don't you put like, we could put a jazz quartet together. You're so good at singing jazz. I knew nothing about jazz or the jazz world, that this other arena existed. And I said, okay. And him and a piano player were playing in a wine bar in Covent Garden, and I said, well, I can't just sing these songs. They're difficult songs. I need to learn how to do it, you know. So he said, well, come down to the wine bar. So remember, I was still quite famous then, and I was turning up at the wine bar, no beehive, you know, and getting up and singing like, you know, Rodgers and Hart songs and stuff like that, and Bacharach and I knew people were going, is that Mary Wilson? What's she doing? But I had to do it because I had to learn that craft. It's different, you know.
Had you known Ronnie Scott before? Because you know, the contact to Ronnie Scott also seemed to pay off in
No, I
this
didn't.
direction, of course, because
No, I didn't know.
he put you together with Stan Getz, didn't he?
Ah, right. What happened was I got a new agent because I was with uh what were they called? Gold, something Gold Talent. Anyway, Wasted Talent they were called. I was with them. They were a pop talent agency. And just before I sat my manager, I got a new agent, a guy called Brian Theobald. And the agency was called BPR, and which stood for Brian Theobald, P Pete King, and R Ronnie Scott. And it was upstairs from the club. And after I'd sacked Andrew, he started to get me these sort of jazz gigs, you know. And then he rang me up one day and he said, I've got you. His terminology I didn't understand. He said, I've got you playing opposite Chico Freeman at Ronnie Scott's. And at first I thought, opposite. I thought he was talking about a place that I was playing opposite. And he said, no. I said, oh, you mean like a support slot? And he said, yeah, at Ronnie Scott's. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to play Ronnie Scott's. And I started playing there. And he did put me on with Stan Getz, yes, at the Royal Festival Hall. And that was a bit scary because it was packed with the audience behind you as well, because it was so packed. Stan Getz was really nice, even though people said he could be a nightmare. He was very nice to me. But I walked on and I knew it was a really snobby jazz audience because they can be a bit snobby, some jazz audiences. And I walked on and I said, well, my agent has told me to drop the cartwheels from the show tonight. Stony silence, apart from Brian, who was laughing in the wings. They didn't get it at all. Oh, God. But I did that. And then I started to headline at Ronnie Scott's and I got to know Ronnie really well. And then I toured with Ronnie and his quintet. So we go on tour. They would do a set. Then Ronnie and Dick, who Dick played trumpet, they'd go off and I'd get on with the quartet and do my set and stuff like that. And we also went on tour with my band and Ronnie Scott. And Ronnie said to me, look, I know that we're meant to be the headline act, but we're old. Do you mind if we go on first? So they would go on first on this sort of theatre tour we did. What a funny man. Fantastic. I got to know him very well, yeah. So yeah, that's what happened.
I mentioned earlier that songs that you have covered, you have to find yourself in, and you've created some versions that, I mean, many of them I feel, you know, are the best versions. My Funny Valentine is just you've done
Thank you.
such a beautiful version of that. What is your approach? You know, take that for an example. What is your approach to cover a song like that, which is already a classic?
Well, it's tricky, but you in order to make it yours, you've got to completely get rid of the original version. What is the point of copying it the way it was? There isn't any point, in my opinion. So you've got to find a way of doing it slightly differently. I mean, a really good example of that is 24 Hours in from Tulsa. When we were rehearsing these, because I played, I don't know if we'll talk about that. I played Dusty Springfield in a musical for almost a year. And people kept saying, why don't you do a Dusty show? Why don't you blah, blah, blah? And I did do a couple of gigs of Dusty songs. However, I realized there were too many ballads. She hasn't got that many up-tempo songs, Dusty. And when you're doing a live gig, you know, for me anyway, it can't be just one thing. So that's when a friend of mine said, well, why don't you do all those girls? Petula, you know, Sandy. And I thought, yeah, that's a good idea, which turned into my album Pop Deluxe, which was my last album 10 years ago. Um, and I remember being with Alistair Gavin, who I did the album with, and we started doing 24 Hours from Tulsa. And I said, this is really sad, this story. Why is it so happy? And So we said, right, let's completely strip it back and turn it into something else. And I mean, when I do it, people love it. They cry. Um, they always come up to me and say, I never knew the words. I didn't know that's what it was about, you know. Um, and that's really interesting, is when you can show off the lyric in a different way. You know, like, listen to this. This is really what this is about, you know. Um, oh, you've always got to make it your own. Um, and you just got to, and then some songs we were going to do Windmills of Your Mind just didn't, it just didn't do anything for me. We started rehearsing it and I said, no, this isn't working. I don't want to sing this one. Um, so that's always quite interesting. And things like Mr. Fix-It Man, because a couple of people said, oh, you should record it. And I said, no, it's a lot, because it's quite funny. It's very, we all show off in it. You know, there's a bit of a bass solo, drums, blah, blah, blah. It's the definitive version is done. I can't better the version by the Sisters Love. I don't think. Only if we recorded a live version, like if it was taken from a gig, that could work. But so yeah, it's listening to the lyric, but also just trying to find a different way of doing it. And if you can't find a different way, don't do it, you know.
You remember the series White Horses, obviously, because you
Yeah,
and I remember it as a kid as well. But when I heard you singing it, it just felt so had such a different emotion to it than
yeah,
what I had in my head from, you know, being a kid and when watching that TV show with the White
yeah,
Horses.
yeah, yeah. Well, I often when I sing it, I don't often tell them what it is, but I say that it's from a TV show that I used to watch with my dad, because he was a shift worker and he'd come home and he'd be there when I got home from school, and we'd do the crossword in the evening news, and then we'd watch a kids show, you know, any of those, you know, the Singing Ringing Tree, or, you know, weird. And I always used to think, oh, I'd love to sing that song, you know, and then it kind of, you know, we did it, and Alistair did a lovely job. It's quite interesting, the whistling at the end, and that noise is a bus pulling up, putting its brakes on. We just sort of do things weird like that. But and also what was really unusual was my guitarist. Well, I still work with him on and off. This guy called James Nisbet. He's Belinda Carlisle's MD, and he's played with me a lot. And so when I said to him, I said, "Oh, I've done this song, White Horses." He said, "My dad wrote that." I said,
No,
"What?" So it was a great thing to say on stage, you know. Yeah, his dad wrote the lyrics, which is they're beautiful, those lyrics. They really are. And the melody's hard. I had to work quite hard on getting it, because it's all over the place, but it's gorgeous, you know. And when I do start singing, when I go on white horses, the audience go, oh, they remember it, you know, because they're my age. Yeah.
that's perfect. Did you always like torch singers, you know, like Dusty Springfield, like Julie London, all those, you know, people that have really put their heart and soul and their emotion deeply into song? Was that something that always attracted you?
Yeah, always, very much so. You know, Peggy Lee, the folks who live on the hill, that's, you know, that recording with I think it's Nelson Riddle's orchestra, but it's conducted by Frank Sinatra. That that is so, that's another song. I do it live sometimes, but I don't think I could record it, because how could you better that? It's so beautiful. We played it at my mum's funeral, for God's sake. Um, so yeah, the whole torch singing. I mean, Julie London, I saw Crimea River. When I say I saw it in The Girl Can't Help It, the film, you know, when I was a teenager on TV, and I'd always remembered it. And then I kept saying to Todd, do you know this song? I don't know what it's called. Do you know this song? You know, no, nobody seemed to know what I was talking about. And then I was in my Austin 1300 with a sunroof, um, driving through Wembley, and it came on the radio. And it was like, that's the song, you know. Um, and that's much more wide open. And I met Arthur Hamilton, who wrote it. He came to a couple of my gigs. Um, that was really interesting. But yeah, torch songs, and not only females, really. I mean, when I think about the Bee Gees' 1st of May, you know, that's like a torch song. And a lot of their, like Got to Get a Message to You and a lot of Bee Gees songs are like torch songs. And look, I mean, Barry wrote those songs for Barbra Streisand and Celine Dion, and all that. But yeah, I suppose if I was to break it down, torch songs and then soul, funky kind of stuff. Those two
Yeah.
elements are quite important to me.
I mean, it's because you have a connection to Mark Armand because of playing, stage with Soft Cell. Because Mark Armand, what's the Charles Aznavour song, or the one that he sung, "What Makes a Man"? That
Oh yes,
is the
yes,
most stunning song, and it
yeah,
really, for me, of course, Mark Armand and you are one in that sense of liking,
yeah. He's
being
another
into.
one. The great thing about Mark is he gives like 300% when he performs. I mean, and I feel it when we've performed together. Because I'm I suppose I feel like I do as well, but my performing style is a bit more laid back, whereas he's very much big with his arms but it's great. We need more of that. I mean, thank God we've got somebody like Ray. What a breath of fresh air she is.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
saw
she's
Mark
got
Armand
she's got
recently.
my style.
Brilliant.
I can't wear stuff like that anymore, but anyway, yeah.
Well, let's get on to this latest album. As you said, there's 10 years in between, and this is one where you've written songs.
Mm, mm.
And I just wondered, in that sense, how critical are you of when you're writing? Is it a different approach? Is it something that is harder for you? Or I don't know. How do you feel about it?
Um, in some ways it can be harder because I'm always comparing myself with the greats, you know. Um, we, my last album was 10 years ago, which was covers, and the one before that was covers. That was a very, very, very intimate, very bare album. The one before that was originals, and the one before that there were some originals. Um, I've never made an album of all my own songs. So what happened was it was just after lockdown, and Adrian, who I hadn't seen for ages, got in touch, and he said, "Do you fancy writing some songs?" And I went, "Yeah, all right," because we write very well together. And so we just started writing, but not with any aim at all. It wasn't like, yeah, let's make an album. None of that. Um, so I think there was no pressure. There wasn't like, well, I've got to write an album, and it better be good. We didn't do that at all. Um, I think the first one we might have written was Spellbound. Um, and it just, I mean, people say this all the time. That one just kind of, bleh, just came out, easily, the lyrics and everything. Some were a bit more tricky. And Adrian, so we write together. I mainly write all the lyrics though. But we work on melodies together, or I'll go home and go, I've got an idea for the middle eight and I'll sing it down the phone or something like, or I'll record it on my phone, that kind of thing. But lyrically, what tends to happen is he'll say, "What about blah blah?" And I go, "No, I'm not saying that. That's rubbish. Terrible. I'm not. I don't think about his feelings at all. But that's how close we are, really. He thinks it's very funny, but because he'll come out with something that I might think is a bit rubbish, it inspires me to go where he's gone, but better. Or more. And also because I'm singing those words. Sometimes he'll suggest some words. I go, "You can't really sing that word. It doesn't scan right. Um, and then, we kind of wrote three songs or something, and he said, "Oh, this is turning into an album." And I said, "Well, my last album was May 2016. We better get on with it." Um, and so I said, "Well, we've got to write originals. I can't put out another album of covers. And I wanted to write, and I wanted to write. I was more confident about what I was writing uh, because I wanted to tell my own story, believe it or not. I mean, not that Spellbound is my own story, but songs like Come On Out, they're all pretty true. Even Kaleidoscope, which is about an experience I had in New York in like 1990. Um, and Tomatoes in the Fridge, it was just, I got to Adrian and said, Let's write a song called Tomatoes in the Fridge. Let's just have a bit of fun. The thing about Tomatoes in the Fridge, it sounds so tender and beautiful, but it's about being annoyed because your partner keeps putting the tomatoes in the fridge and they don't taste of anything.
There's a song on there, and it sounds like the song When You Met Your Husband.
Is it the You're 5,000 miles away? Love
Yes,
letter.
love
Love letter.
letter.
Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is about my husband because he's in LA now, you know. And often I'm there as well, but because I've got this album coming out, I'm here doing things like this, you know, to promote my album. So, and it's I mean, thank God for FaceTime, but you know, I can't speak to him until 4 o'clock, something like that. Um, and it's weird because you're in different moods as well, because you're in a different time of day. You've been up all day, you might be a bit tired, you might, you know, whereas he's just got up and he's all perky, you know. Um, I mean, not that it's, I mean, you know, we're fine, but it's quite an interesting thing that, and I'm sure people must think we're a bit mad that we spend a bit of time apart. But I mean, he was here from like October to February. It's not like, you know, only a few weeks here and there. It's more than that. And as I say, I'm usually out there for 3 months, but at the moment, no. Um, but I think what's good about it is we both respect each other's um, jobs, careers, you know, and it's quite nice we've got our own careers because I think that's what keeps the spark going, really, you know. I mean, he's in television, so different to me, but he's also very musical. He used to be in bands and stuff. And he plays guitar and piano, so that's really good. And he's very handy when it comes to me needing a video. So yeah, yeah. Um,
You better
yeah,
stick
so
in
you're
there.
right. That is what it's about. That is what it's about.
So
Mm.
tell me about the single Good News.
Well, that was one of the first ones we wrote, and it wasn't called Good News for ages. And I kept saying, I don't like the chorus. I don't like the chorus. I didn't like the melody. You know, I liked everything else. And Adrian said, well, you're going to have to come up with something else. And I remember I came back here and I was sitting there and I, I thought, well, I've just got to keep doing it until I get to something. And I came up with that melody and that title, which is a bit sort of Beach Boysy, I think. Um, but what happened was I watched a documentary about Kate Garraway and her husband, who, for people who might not know about it, he got COVID really, really bad and he was hospitalized. And there was a documentary made about how she was coping with it because she's got 2 kids, blah, blah, blah. And she could only talk to him on a screen. So, because some people thought that was about me and my husband, but it's not. It's about her only being able to talk to him on a screen. And he was like unconscious anyway. But, you know, and I thought, oh God, that must be awful, you know. And I just thought, oh, I think I'm going to write a song about it. Um, and so I did, but then it became about the fact that the world is in such turmoil that not only was she looking for some good news, but we all are, because it's like, I mean, I get to the point now I think, I don't know if I can watch the news, you know, I get terribly affected by it. Um, so that's how that came about, really. And just things like, I was really pleased with the little breakdown bit where I sing, we'll swim in the bluest of oceans. It was like, even when I sing it or hear it, there's only like 3 or 4 lines there, but I'm really proud of that bit, that the melody and what I'm saying, which is, you know, this hopefulness, you know, that kind of thing, which is, and it's funny, isn't it? Because I was thinking about this the other day. We still write about love or about things getting better. We never write about our jobs, you know, kind of thing. Because really, all everybody wants is just love and closeness and friendship, you know, and positivity. Um, so that's what that was. I wanted to make sure that I didn't write any miserable songs. I didn't want to write any songs that were without hope or I didn't want that, you know. I didn't want I learned the truth at 17, you know, the world was made for beauty queens kind of thing. Fantastic song, but I didn't want a really, really miserable song. I wanted to make sure all of them were quite up, you know.
I think that's lovely because I do think we live in a time where it's so hard to think about the world that we're in, that in a sense we want to escape it and be in some sort of uplifting
Yeah, yeah,
moment. So I think
yeah.
that's really beautiful. At the end, I just want to say to you, I mean, much success with Girl About Town. I really hope,
Thank
and
you.
with your forthcoming concerts this year. But also, I want to thank you for what you've contributed to pop culture because, you know, I remember when you came on the scene in my terms, obviously you were around before, but when you came onto the scene in my terms and I saw you on Top of the Pops, it was a total breath of fresh air, something
Oh,
completely
thank you. That's very nice.
different and unique. You have an amazingly beautiful voice, and as I said, listening to all your tracks in the last couple of days it's been an honor. It's just been wonderful, and you've contributed so much to popular culture because of your voice and the beauty of your voice, and obviously the image. You know, who can forget
Oh God,
the
yeah, yeah,
beehive? Do you keep
yeah.
the is the beehive hidden somewhere, like a stuffed toy or something? I don't know.
No, no. I've got some dolls people have made me. Here, have a quick look at this. Here you go. Here's one that someone made me.
Oh,
Can you
brilliant.
see her?
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. So, but no, because it was my hair, it wasn't a wig or anything like that. I mean, Amy wore a piece, Amy Winehouse, but no. And the thing is, when you're older, when you're young and you have that retro look and the beehive, it's kind of cute and ironic. But when you're older and you do it, you just look even older. It's not a great look for an older woman. So that's why I still like to zhuzh my hair up a bit when I go on stage but often it doesn't stay that way. But and I try and have good, funky haircuts. But no, I mean I still love glamour and there's always a nod to that look and that period. But with a bit more class, I think, these days.
Well,
Thank
Mari
you for
Wilson.
saying those things. What lovely things you just said to me. Thank you so much.
Well, I'll just
Very
end with, I
kind.
mean, you're still beautiful. So thank you
Well,
so
thank
much,
you.
Mari Wilson. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. You're beautiful too.
Up there is an interview I recommend. Down there is where you can find all the podcast interviews. And here is where you can connect.